Surprise third-party ports have been revealed for Switch. We've got developers crying over one of Nintendo's largest games, and the strictest ban and suspension policy yet put into practice. Is it a good thing? I think so, but I gotta know what y'all think. So, good morning, Mario, and good morning, Switch fans. Nintendo has their own very creative way of policing their user base in the past, right? They don't have voice chat. Pretty hard to be rude when you can't speak. They have very convoluted friend codes, so you can't even really add all the people you might want to add. And frankly, they don't have many of the third-party large multiplayer games that set the genre and the industry on fire. But something new has entered the fray, and we are going to discuss. First, I have a couple news updates for you. One pretty glorious. Yesterday, we talked about Batman Arkham Collection leaking Switch release date October 13th. Wake up this morning, and Nintendo has painted a absolutely illustrious picture of Batman, a watercolor masterpiece, something out of a comic book cover, spread widescreen, and announced themselves that the game is coming out October 13th. I have to imagine this is a reaction to the leak, or maybe it was planned and the leak was pushed a button a day early. I don't know, but Batman coming out in October, that's very good news. And like I mentioned, I think we're going to have a lot of third parties really trying to fill the gap since Nintendo is a little bit lighter in certain months this holiday season. Arkham Collection will be a nice one, despite one game on the cart, 2 on the download. You know, think of that as you will. But Feral Interactive has teased 2 more parts. And who is Feral Interactive? Well, they have ported some pretty cool games, including the Lara Croft co-op games. The isometric Lara Crofts, Guardian of Light and Temple of Osiris, I think, are the subtitles. Everyone wanted the new Tomb Raider games. Instead, we got Lara Croft, but honestly, those are great games. If you haven't played them, you really should. Some of the most fun co-op I've had in the last 10 to 15 years. I'm aging myself. Anyhow, they announced that they're putting 2 more titles on Switch, and they gave really interesting teases. One is a picture of dolphins, and one is like a Michael Jackson picture. Apparently, they are famous for using song lyrics as teases, and there's a lot of theories as to what these 2 are going to lead to. This company brought over Lara Croft. They also brought Alien Isolation, so they have pretty good porting chops, as both those games were received quite well on Nintendo Switch. It seems like the general consensus is that one of these games is going to be Hitman related, possibly Deus Ex related, and the other is going to be Just Cause or Echo the Dolphin. Very disparate, different genres, different franchises, different games, but it does look like they will be bringing some big characters and big franchises to Switch, hopefully soon. I would love it if one of them was just the Tomb Raider games. They did Lara Croft, so they can just continue on with that character. But none of these hints seem to be hinting at Lara Croft or anything from that franchise, so we'll have to wait and see. But like I said, expect a lot more ports to creep up. I think we'll see them at the next Direct, which I just put a video out on if you want to check it out. My thoughts and predictions and date and games that'll be at the September Direct. But yeah, I think we're going to be seeing more of this. Feral Interactive does solid ports, so good news. Now, in terms of crying and tears, I hope none of you are crying today. But if you are, you have some compatriots over at MiHoYo, the developers of Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact was supposed to be on Switch a long time ago, and just maybe we have our reason for why it hasn't. It seems like there's a grudge over there against a certain Nintendo title that Genshin may look very comparable to. In fact, apparently there were a lot of tears shed because people didn't get Genshin Impact at launch and were just making direct comparisons to Breath of the Wild. Now, on one hand, man, I would feel great if people were comparing my game to Breath of the Wild. But apparently the developers of Genshin took it the other way. They felt like they were being accused of copycatting, of ripping off, and of complete misunderstanding. President of MiHoYo, Liu Wei, says not many understood. There were a lot of misunderstandings. At the time, in our team, everyone was really worried. I remember many young colleagues crying and saying to me, "Why is this happening? What did we do wrong?" But this youthful innocence, you could say we are fearless. We thought and acted. And they don't call out Zelda by name, but it's clear that that's what they're referencing, as people were a bit upset at the beginning of how much it looked and felt like Breath of the Wild, but I think maybe their action was to not drop the game on Switch. I feel like we haven't heard about Genshin for a long time. I looked back in the record books and it seems like last May we had updates saying it was still coming. In 2021 there were apparently technical difficulties, and maybe this is just pure conspiracy theory, but what if they decided to not focus on Switch because they kind of hated the comparisons with Breath of the Wild? Seems like a foolish decision because it's such a fertile player base for you to amass an even larger audience for your game, but why hasn't Genshin Impact been on Switch? I don't know how much of an impact that game will make launching in 2023 or 2024, but I found this story to be very interesting. On one hand, like, man, I'm sad that they were crying. On the other, I don't know, it's an unprecedented crisis, they called it, that they were being compared to Zelda, and that just seems a little strange to me. I guess they felt like they were a very different game. They felt like they had something original. I guess, I don't know if they did copycat or not. They claimed that they were really doing their own thing, and I think Genshin has, from then, evolved on to be its own thing, but just a really interesting story, and, you know, Zelda just making people cry for all sorts of reasons. Now then, bans and suspensions. We know Nintendo recently upped the ante by saying sharing games is a no-no. Sharing was caring when I was little, but in today's era, if it's on the Switch, you're gonna get banned. Nintendo has upped their policies with sharing games and other modifications, hacking accounts, multiple accounts, things of that sort, but it's this new policy from Microsoft that I find fascinating. They just implemented their new enforcement stacking policy, which levels a strike system with different lengths of bans and attributes point values to what your infraction is. If you use profanity, it's 1 strike. If you cheat, it's 1 strike. Sexually inappropriate comments or harassment and bullying are 2 strikes. And then hate speech is the worst of the bunch with 3 strikes. Now you can get up to 8 strikes before you get a year-long ban. And the first strike is a day ban. The second strike is a day ban. The third strike, a 3-day ban. Fourth strike, 7, 5, 14, 6, 21, 7, a 60-day, 2-month ban. And your 8th strike is Toodaloo for a year. Now, these strikes last for 6 months before they age off your record. So if you get 2 strikes and then 6 months later get a third, well, that'll actually only count as your first. They do have an appeal system in place so you can appeal these strikes and tell them what you were trying to mean, or if you're just being falsely accused, which I think is important in a system as rigid as this to have a way for you to prove your innocence. But if you're not proved innocent, they will enforce the ban, and they've got this graphic that showcases exactly how that's going to work out. Now, personally, I think this is great. I think a very upfront, granular system of like, if you're a jerk, this is the price you'll pay. If you're a mean, hateful person, you can't play on our system, and we're going to enforce this over and over again. I think this is really nifty. Now, Nintendo may not need something of this sort because they have magically erased the problem by not even allowing it to begin. Like I said, they have no voice chat, they have friend codes, and they don't have big games like Call of Duty or things of that sort yet. But going into the next generation for Switch 2, I think we'll get way more multiplayer. And dear my goodness gracious, please have voice chat and a more comparable online system to that of PlayStation and Xbox. If they do, I think this is a really good system. I think attributing different levels of strikes to different offenses is very good. And you know, some may say cheating is the worst because it directly impacts the game, but I love that Xbox has categorized some of the more hateful speeches and some of the more impactful ways of being negative and mean and just downright nasty as a higher penalty and punishment. I think this is pretty cool, and I like where they're headed with it. Now, they're very obvious of what it means. Nintendo, with their sharing thing, not as obvious. They don't detail if there's an appeal process. They don't detail exactly what will happen. There's not a listed system of how the strikes or how the bans will work. So I appreciate the clarity, because at the end of the day, PlayStation, Microsoft, Nintendo, they can all set their own rules. But I like being upfront about them. I don't think it should be something that's hidden behind the scenes. I don't think anyone should even dare tango with a system like this. I don't think anyone should be hateful, mean, using profanity, cheating, anything of that. But if you're going to have a system like this, it does need to be upfront. It does need to be clear, and you do need to set those boundaries right from the jump. And I like that Xbox has put this into place. I hope that it's effective, I hope that it's successful, and I hope it's something that can make the gaming community seem a little more welcoming, a little more exciting, and a little more inclusive. It's far past the time that the gaming audience is no longer viewed as just a bunch of raunchy, rude idiots. That's not who we are, and this type of system should hopefully help keep those loudmouths out the way. They don't speak for all of us, but unfortunately, many times they do make the most noise. And I want to know what you thought of this system. Do you like the strike-based system? Is 6 months enough time? Like, if you're a jerk, 6 months later, did you learn a lesson, or are you just going to repeat your mistakes? Do you think 8 strikes for 365 days is too lenient, or not lenient enough? And would you like to see Nintendo implement something like this? Have you ever encountered anything negative on Switch, given that they don't really have voice chat or a whole lot of ways to communicate? Or is Nintendo just the smartest of the bunch? You don't need enforcement stacking or strikes when you don't have a way to communicate whatsoever. Maybe that's actually a genius move behind the scenes, although I'm not quite so sure. I'm curious though, what do you guys think about this? I think this is a big thumbs up for Microsoft. I know they make a lot of missteps. I know their Xbox division is kind of struggling, but I do like this, and I feel like they are always at the forefront of accessibility, of trying to be inclusive, and of, really tackling important issues like this that maybe get forgotten when we're just concerned with review scores and the latest patch. So let me know your take in the comments down below, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. And until next time, SwitchForce out.